Mikhail Gorbachev has died, and he was the puppet of a man called Yuri Andropov. And Andropov was sort of like the original gangster of hardcore communism, invading other countries and smashing uprisings and that sort of stuff. So, yeah, Andropov's puppet is now dead. Still alive, of course, is Andropov's biggest fan, Vladimir Putin. So for the last 20 or 30 years, Putin has tried to become Andropov. So Yuri Andropov was the head of the KGB, and he had vast amounts of experience in international diplomacy. He crushed uprisings in Hungary and Czechoslovakia. He played an important role in the Afghanistan invasion, and he became General Secretary of the Soviet Union. Mikhail Gorbachev, on the other hand, he was a meaningless local official of the Komsomol, and he was entertaining the powerful people during their spa trips. That is not a joke. And now that Gorbachev is dead, everybody tries to interpret him in a certain way that serves a certain ideology. So some people are clinging to this fantasy that diplomacy and trade solved the problems back then, and this ended the Soviet Union, and the people rose up in former Soviet East Germany, and the regimes fell and that sort of thing. And then you had in Poland the Solidarity movement, and they supposedly toppled the government. But this is of course just fantasy. In reality, you had high-level meetings and negotiations between Washington and Moscow to transform the Soviet Union and to end it in its current form. And now the hardcore supporters of the Putin regime are calling Gorbachev a traitor because he was getting too close to the West, and he was making too many concessions and that sort of thing. But that was his task. That's why Gorbachev had been created, basically, by Andropov. So this was the plan all along. So some people are saying now the Soviet economy was doing okay, and Gorbachev messed it all up, and communism was forced upon Russia by agents of international finance and that sort of thing. So Gorbachev was not a Soviet king who could rule from his throne. The actual command structure of the Soviet Union was secret. Nobody was supposed to know who was giving orders really to whom. And it was Andropov, as far as we can reconstruct, it was Andropov who had recruited Gorbachev and turned him from this nobody to the formerly most powerful man in the Soviet Union. And this was needed because they wanted a guy who seemed harmless. They wanted a guy who seemed credible as a reformer. Someone like Gorbachev, somebody who wasn't involved in the invasion of Afghanistan, somebody who wasn't involved in crushing uprisings in Hungary and Czechoslovakia. Gorbachev was born in 1931 to a family of poor farmers right in the middle of the communist forced collectivization. And of course, many people died during that period unnecessarily. And Gorbachev wrote in his book, Memoirs, that both his grandfathers had been arrested for crimes against the czars, or the government at the time. He joined the Komsomol, the youth organization of the Communist Party, which pretty much everyone did, and he became first secretary of the Komsomol for the region of Stavropol. And this is where he remained for the next 22 years, sitting on the same desk, basically. And he actually became the party chief for the region of Stavropol, which was kind of a big deal back then, but not that big of a deal compared to these other people like Andropov. And in Stavropol, you had these nice spas that were visited by the party elite, And it was Gorbachev's task to manage these the stays of these more powerful people. So he was kind of that was his job, right? And then Yuri Andropov, the real guy, you know, Andropov recruited Gorbachev and brought him to the Politburo. And that's when this speedy career happened. It was a faster rise than anybody since the days of Stalin. So Gorbachev was fairly young compared to his colleagues in the Central Committee. Then he became regular member of the Politburo. Very powerful position, and he was pretty young compared to the other people. And he hadn't done anything special in his career. So then, early 1980s, secret negotiations between Washington and Moscow over the future of the Soviet Union, and this was a lot of stuff that was negotiated. For example, the reunification of Germany and the removal of Russian tanks and Russian forces from Central and Eastern Europe. And that's also kind of the issue with the pipelines, because part of the negotiations, as far as we can reconstruct that, part of the negotiations were those Russian pipelines and the energy dependency. So then we have Vladimir Putin, who was a smaller KGB guy, and he worked in Soviet Eastern Germany, and his task was technological espionage. So he was running assets, he was running agents to steal and buy technology from Western Germany and other places. So that technology could then be replicated and studied by the Soviet communist bloc. So it's true spy work, yes, but nothing too impressive. This was not the highest level of espionage and international subterfuge and things like that. And so the Soviet Union was ended. Vladimir Putin went home, and then he was recruited from inside the KGB to become part of a special group, a special task force, to hide the money, to hide the Soviet money at international places, tax havens. So part of it went to the city of London, but only filtered through shell companies, and other monies went to, these international tax haven islands, and that was supposed to ensure that the money didn't fall into the hands of the average citizens in Russia, for example. And this was also part of the secret negotiations, that this money could be placed internationally. And so the newspapers, the Scotsman, reported in 2004 that Vladimir Putin had become sort of a copy of Andropov. So Putin was a huge fan of Andropov. He tried to be Andropov. Next, we had the former Soviet intelligence asset and defector, Ion Pachepa, and he wrote for the National Review in 2004 that Putin was more or less a copy of Yuri Andropov, and they even reinstated the Andropov monument at the Lubyanka. So then he explains that the KGB became the ruling force in Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union. So the party people were pushed aside, the military leaders were pushed aside, and it was just the KGB then who was calling the shots. And this was managed by people such as Vladimir Putin. But Putin was a third-rate, fourth-rate guy within the KGB, so it's highly, highly unlikely that Putin was becoming truly powerful. He was just doing his job. There was a different, way more experienced command structure, and this command structure is secret to this very day. So Andropov was running things for as long as he could until he died, and then there were other people like Andropov who were managing these things, and they needed fresh faces. They needed people like Putin, and that makes it very unlikely that Putin nowadays is a singular leader, that he can order the Ukraine war by himself in these sort of things. This is what you need to keep in mind. So many people are now hoping that Putin dies or gets removed from power, and then we might get somebody like Gorbachev, and that would totally change things and would make everything better. But as we've seen, Gorbachev was the puppet of Andropov, and Putin is trying to be Andropov. So we actually might get to see a repetition of this. We might get to see a new puppet ruler in Russia who claims to reform everything and wants to resume trade with the West and resume political relations with the West. So yeah, George Bush Sr. met in December of 1989, met with Gorbachev for a high-level summit at Malta. And after that, Gorbachev had done his thing, and he wasn't needed any longer, so they basically removed him, and they left him to rot, basically. And everybody who knows Russian history is aware that Russia always expands when they're doing well. They aggressively expand, and they will contract when they have problems. So Gorbachev was apparently happy about the annexation of Crimea a couple of years ago, and Gorbachev was not commenting on the recent Ukraine war. So he's not really a reformer. And now we've seen in actually the European press that there is an actual contract now between Russia and communist North Korea. Now you probably heard about these ideas being tossed around in the last couple of weeks of 100,000 North Korean soldiers getting moved to Ukraine. So you can put these people on a train and then drive them all the way through Russia right into Ukraine. So this was talked about on Russian television. This was sort of an idea. And of course, if it's 100,000 North Korean troops and their long-range rocket artillery, which they're really good at apparently, if it's 100,000, it could become ultimately 250,000, and this could be the deciding force in Ukraine. And then they could attack Poland next, or the Baltics, or Finland, or Sweden. So people didn't want to hear that, and people claimed this was logistically impossible to put people on a train, right? Because apparently they haven't looked at a map. They don't see how close North Korea is to Russia. So it definitely is logistically possible. And now we have reports from the Austrian Kronen newspaper, Kronenzeitung, and the German Bild Zeitung. There's an actual contract now for thousands of North Korean construction soldiers that are supposed to be sent to Ukraine. So what is a construction soldier? Well, they do special tasks, probably build bridges or reinstate bridges and that sort of thing. But they also can fight. They also have the capability of conducting warfare. And this has now been formalized. There were talks in July and August between the Russian diplomats and the North Korean diplomats. That's what we're now hearing. So it's about reconstruction of Ukraine, they say, or the new fake republics of Donetsk or Luhansk. And so, that's about to become a reality, apparently. Thousands of North Korean communist soldiers in Europe. And this may become 100,000. This may become 250,000 actual communist troops. And in exchange for that help, North Korea is supposed to get support for their ambitious nuclear program, which could create all sorts of problems for legal problems. United Nations membership, Russia and this council and that membership. We'll see how that goes. And of course now Russia and China are conducting large-scale military drills, naval drills, and mostly. It's called Vostok 2022. Footage has been released by the Russian ministry. 50,000 troops, 5,000 vessels, vehicles, 60 warships. And this drill is supposed to happen really, really close to Taiwan, which may become a target very, very soon. So there might be a naval blockade against Taiwan. There may be a full invasion of Taiwan, and this, of course, could become a much larger conflict. And so we can clearly see where the alliances are at this point. Russia, China, North Korea. So this is exactly what people, what especially conservatives in the West, what they don't want, what they didn't expect to see. So if you listen to Jordan Peterson, if you listen to Tucker Carlson, if you listen to those types of people, then they told us we should hand Ukraine over to Russia. We should let Russia do whatever they want, because supposedly Russia is conservative now, and we need these conservative allies against communism, against the Chinese. But now we see, of course, a Russian-Chinese alliance becoming a reality. And who knows for how long they've been coordinating this. I mean, you don't spontaneously invade Ukraine, a country the size of France. You know, this doesn't happen. These are superpowers. They plan ahead, and they weigh their options, and they calculate what the risks are, what the potential benefits are. And so it really becomes a necessity to understand those three superpowers and their weird relation with each other. So there might be a secret cartel of all three superpowers. I mean, now that we see there's probably a cartel between Russia and China, there might be a triple alliance at the very top. They might be maintaining their balance and their status, so no other competitor could rise up and become a threat. I've been specializing on the three superpowers and their common roots, so you may want to check out some other videos about that and future videos that we're going to post.